be supporting this bill. Kia ora.
Speaker.
I call to Ururo Flavel.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker. Merry Christmas to you in case I don't see you later on.
Thank you.
And Happy New Year. Kia ora tātou katoa te whare. Mr. Speaker, I don't think it's any surprise that every time the Māori Party stands in this House, we stand firm, I think, and I hope, on the foundation of kaupapa Māori. What's kaupapa Māori? Inherited values of our ancestors. And we hope, those values to every debate as we seek to represent the authentic, independent voice of Māori in this Parliament. So central to our approach has been the commitment to kotahitanga, to a common unity of purpose. A commitment to kotahitanga is not mutually exclusive. It can also embrace diversity and difference. And importantly, it requires the representation of all interests within the scope of the overall design. And so, as we looked at the proposals for the new interventions framework for the Polytechnics sector, we thought about how best to ensure representation issues were taken seriously. Our aspiration has always been for increased representation, Māori representation on tertiary governance bodies, including mana whenua and Māori student representation. And yet this bill moved in the opposite direction, in that the size of the Polytechnic councils would be reduced from between 12 and 20 members to 8 members, with 4 of the 8 to be appointed by the Minister of Tertiary Education. What this has meant in effect is that there are no guaranteed seats for staff, students, iwi Māori and community representatives. So this was completely against the aspiration we held in the Māori Party, and as a consequence we voiced our opposition in our vote in the first reading. We knew that providing for only one community member would mean that most Māori representative seats would be scrapped. There is no provision for Māori representatives of any kind in the current legislation. And while some might refer to the requirement of section 1714A that it is, quote, desirable that the council of an institution should reflect so far as is reasonably practicable the ethnic and socio-economic diversity of the communities served by the institution, end of quote. So in practice, it is basically a toothless provision. At the committee stage of this bill, I noted that we cannot rely on these sorts of clauses for the special status of Māori because they do not address the constitutional significance of the treaty in any debate on Māori representation. Our constituency have elected us into Parliament to do everything we can to advance their aspirations. Fear of failure cannot be a justification not to try something. Our members have always urged us to act, believing that it is far better to try and fail than to fail to try in the first place. And so, during the committee stages, I put forward an amendment to establish a process for Māori representation which would be transparent and clearly stated, whereby the appointee truly reflects the values and aspirations of the community. The idea was to create not only a requirement for Māori representation, but for it to come from across the board. 2 academic staff positions, 1 for Māori, 2 student positions, 1 for Māori, as well as Māori community representation. All community representative nominations would need to at least be passed by local hapu and iwi. The amendments increased the membership of the Polytechnic councils from 8 to 12, and they reinstate compulsory seats for the Vice-Chancellor, academic staff, students and the community appointed members. In addition, specific provision is made for Māori membership on the council in order to give real expression to the Treaty of Waitangi. So the issue of Māori student representation on councils has always been of great importance for Māori students and to Te Mana Akonga, the Association of Māori Students across all campuses. That organisation, in fact, has a treaty claim to amend the Education Act to explicitly provide for Māori student membership. So the amendment that we put forward was a positive signal to that very large constituency, that there are members of Parliament who are willing to listen and to learn from their leadership. So the issue of a Māori staff representative has also been of much interest among our membership and indeed right across the education sector. We were keen that the Polytechnic councils would be able to benefit from members who have the capacity to uphold academic standards in teaching, learning and research. It was also a deliberate effort to try to layer in greater recognition of kaupapa Māori based standards and methodologies. Of course, it isn't only an issue of representation solely. It is also the complexity of high-intentioned legislation with mismatched policy and inconsistent strategy and matching business plans. So I'm reminded of that saying by another great Te Arawa philosopher, never be afraid to try something new. Remember, amateurs built the Ark, professionals built the Titanic. So the legislators, policy makers, writers and architects of the tertiary education governance arrangements sure had the highest intentions, but if it doesn't make the difference on the ground, then surely we need to take the risk and look for solutions that will. That was where we were coming from in terms of our bicultural model that recognises Māori representation on Polytechnic councils. The Māori Party has greatly valued the support of Waireke Institute of Technology in developing this model, which is about representation within a new paradigm that was all about our recognition and representation against a treaty model. What we want is actually very simple, sir. What we want to see councils reflect so far as possible is the ethnic and socio-economic diversity of the community it serves. Pretty simple. There is an important element to the discussion that I believe the members of this House need to consider. If we acknowledge that the larger proportion of Māori constituents fall within the lowest socio-economic bracket, which we also acknowledge stems largely from Crown policies retarding Māori social and economic growth from as early as 1840, then, sir, surely it makes sound economic sense to recognise that the clauses alone will not by themselves serve the wider interests of the group. The greatest of high-flying intentions will amount to nothing unless there are faces at the table to speak to the immediate, short and long-term needs of all the people across the community. Inconsistency within the legislation, the Treasury allocation to each ministry, the policy writer's approach to give actual meaning to these clauses, and then the strategic and business plan within our public agencies is what's let us down. This repetitive failure forces us as a party to demand more on behalf of Māori. But what we are really asking for is clear consistency and equal access for all people within Aotearoa who sit every day within a less privileged position. And unfortunately for all of us, predominantly Māori make up a far greater majority within that grouping, and this is why we are forced to ask the hard questions. Mr. Speaker, at the select committee stage, Te Runanga o Manukau Institute of Technology took these views to the table. They recommended that consideration be given for the inclusion of a Māori directorate function. In their case, this is known as Te Aomorangi, in the legislation as an acknowledgement of the high percentage of unemployed and uneducated tangata whenua in the county's Manukau area. Other submitters also echoed this sort of view. The New Zealand Nurses Organisation suggested that diverse communities cannot be adequately represented by a single person. The Students' Association of Nelson Marlborough Institute of Technology also made the point that students are key stakeholders in Polytechnics and contribute a lot to their councils, and so their views should be heard. So it's all now part of the record, of course, that we were unsuccessful in having our amendments voted into law. But we tried, and we will continue to try to ensure that Polytechnics are of the people, Parliament is of the people, and ultimately the people are why we're actually here. We will continue to work with the Minister to find a way to address our pleas and are hopeful of some momentum being gained. So in closing, just reflecting on the Honourable Trevor Mallard's statement, and even he will acknowledge that if legislation in this House is going to pass and can be done without the Māori Party, then that's what I suppose the situation is in terms of the democracy of the House. But we've stated our case, and we will continue to state our case into the future. And I'd hope that, as a parting shot, I suppose, is that if there are members who wish to espouse, I suppose, the place of Māori at representative table, it would be good to, over the holidays, look towards the correct pronunciation of Māori words as a good starting point, which would then give some meaning to the notions of allowing Māori at the representative table. Kia ora tātou.